And we're live. Hi. Hello. Hello, everyone. Let me get my docs lined up in a row. Welcome to this afternoon's class. Welcome to the first live stream for July. I'm particularly excited because it is, of course, Fibroids Awareness Month. And I'm hoping that we can use this month to get really a lot of educational tools and resources out there in the space for everyone, every lady who needs this, lady and family, relatives, friends who need to know about fibroids. There's still so much that we don't know about this condition, still so many questions that we have to ask and we need answering. But this month is a good opportunity to try and put those resources together in one space, or to get discussions going about where research should be going, what kind of studies, what kind of treatments that we can look forward to, and so on. So I'm really pleased to kick off this live stream. It's just going to be a general discussion class, although my theme is around healthy habits. But you're welcome to send in any questions during the stream. Welcome to send in any comments about fibroids and your experience. Thank you so much for joining the stream. Please give this video a like, and of course, consider subscribing to the channel. To be great to have you on board. So just quick housekeeping before we get into the meat of today's class. All through the month, we have different resources going on our website, on the blog. We have different resources going out here on YouTube. Every single day, there's a video every single day on fibroids this whole month. 1st to 31st, we are going to do it. Somehow we're going to do it. We're also going to have resources on our different social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and the works. So please, any one of these spaces, if you have a question about fibroids, if you are curious, if you're concerned, if you want some guidance and so on, please hit me up or hit us up any of those platforms. We'll be happy to hear from you. Now, for specific person-related inquiries, I will always pull you down to our website, where we have the email health information service. We also have the digital concierge service, which allows you to arrange a couple of sessions with me or one of our clinicians to look at your symptoms and just help to navigate or guide you through whatever your needs are. So that's also available. Plus, we're doing Instagram giveaways throughout this month as well. So if you want to win one of these digital concierge sessions, which is worth £99, head over to our Instagram, go and follow us, and just keep your ears peeled out for one of our posts later on this week. We're going to be telling you how you can potentially win one of these sessions. So yeah, lots of interesting things going on. I'm Dr. Sylvia. I'm a GP and a health educator. Welcome. Please let me know where you're watching from. Let me know, what kind of things you're up to this weekend. And of course, like I've said, if you have any specific fibroid-specific questions or comments, please send them in. So, as I promised, we're going to be talking about fibroids, healthy habits. Now, to talk about the healthy habits that you can undertake to maintain a somewhat reasonable existence and live with fibroids, we have to look at the risk factors. So I'm going to look at the risk factors and marry them to the potential healthy habits that you can engage with. Now, fibroids as a condition have been on for several centuries. So fibroids is not something that we're completely new to. It's something that human beings have had to deal with for several years, going back to the 100 AD 100 to 100, where they were described as womb stones. So they have been, for women, they have been something to really contend with. The symptoms are disabling. The symptoms are horrendous for many women. Don't forget that not everyone will have fibroid symptoms. When we're talking about how common the symptoms of fibroids are, we're talking about possibly up to 70% of women or more could have fibroids. That's just how common this condition is. And the only reason why it's not classed as dangerous is because, of course, it's not malignant. It's a benign tumor, but it is so common. And since a number of women don't have symptoms, it's probably not reported as much as it could be. Otherwise, it might be even more common than what we think. So this is what fibroids are. They are tumors. I thought I had a picture of fibroids. Okay, never mind. There are tumors or growths that happen in the womb, and they can grow to different sizes. They usually grow mostly around the reproductive age of a woman. And before, our thinking used to be that by the time you get into menopause, fibroids start to shrink, because back then we used to think that fibroids are mainly driven by hormones, estrogen in particular, and then as you grow older and your estrogen levels start to drop down, then the fibroids start to shrink. But of course, now we know that it's not just hormones. There's a lot more to fibroids than what you think. And we're going to touch some of those things today. And so we are having women past menopause who are still having trouble with fibroids, not just having the fibroids, but still having really troublesome symptoms. So it's a condition that we still have so much to learn, and it's one of those what do you call them now? One of those really distressing ones, and lots more conversation need to be held about fibroids. So let us begin. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for liking this video. Please share it with somebody, because lots of us have questions and we need to continue to engage ourselves, engage our scientists, engage our policymakers on fibroids and the different potential effects they could have. So like I said at the beginning, we're going to be looking at these healthy habits vis-a-vis potential risk factors. So I'm going to go through some of the risk factors for fibroids, because the healthy habits are really based on reversing or amending the risk factors. That's what I want you to get away with. So you're going to get 2 for 1 today. You're going to understand fibroid risk factors, and then we're going to relate them to how they can be modified, or how the ones that can be modified, which we're able to change so that we can have healthy habits. So these are the risk factors. Here is my tool. Hopefully you can hear me. If you can't, it'd be great to just say hi in the comment section, but I'm just going to do a sound check just in case. Let me see. Where are we now? Let me just play this and make sure I've not been on silent for. Here we go. Yeah, okay, sounds good, fantastic. Right, so these are risk factors for fibroids. Let me leave this on the screen for some moments. Okay, so got 2 columns, because like risk factors means these are conditions where, or that are associated with a chance of developing a particular condition, right? We don't know what causes fibroids. We're still far from this is what causes fibroids, okay? But according to studies, people with fibroids can be associated with these one or more of these things that you've got on the screen. If you're just joining the stream, you're very, very much welcome. Thank you so much for clicking and for taking the time. We looking at fibroids today. This class is about fibroid risk factors and about some healthy habits that you can maintain or you can undertake for fibroids. I'm trying to remove this ticker so that you can see. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so these are some of the risk factors, and I'm going to talk through them. I've got them in 2 separate columns, because some are what we call modifiable. That is, you can change them, while some are not modifiable. That means, well, you have them, that is it, you can't change them. For example, as you can see, their race, age, pregnancy, and so on. So let's just go through them one by one. I'm going to focus more on the ones on the other side, that is the modifiable ones, because those are the healthy habits that we're going to undertake. So race, of course, you can't do anything about your race, your ethnicity. So what are the facts that we know about fibroids, and what information have our researchers been able to tell us? So we know that the fibroids are a condition that tends to be greater associated with women of African backgrounds, whether you're African American, Afro-Caribbean. It seems that the fibroids are more common in our ethnicity, in our race. So according to some studies, fibroids are more common, 3 times more common in women of African background compared to white women, and twice more common in Hispanic women compared to white women. So there is some ethnic variation or difference, if I can use those terms, for some reason, and we don't know why. So this is where we still need more studies. We still need more exploration. There's some thoughts as to why this might be here and there. But certainly you don't have the same environmental conditions in Africa, in Nigeria, for example, as you might do for an African American in Texas, or as you might do as an Afro-Caribbean lady, or as you might do for a Hispanic woman. So there has to be more than, a person's race and environmental factors, which is why fibroids is a little bit of a complex situation or condition. So we don't have the full explanation. But some of the thinking is that it may be that women of African backgrounds have higher amounts of some types of hormones, like steroid hormones. It might have something to do with our genes. It might have something to do with vitamin D levels, low vitamin D, where women of African background tend to be more often diagnosed with low vitamin D levels compared to white women, for example. And this may be because we're absorbing less of ultraviolet rays, because that vitamin D is produced through our skin. We'll talk more about vitamin D. There's also the possibility or the potential for racial discrimination and its association with chronic stress. So I want to emphasize that, because again, we're still looking at studies, but there is some evidence that women, African American women, who have experienced discrimination fall into the category of people where they experience chronic stress, and chronic stress can lead to inflammation, and the effects of inflammation on the tissues can increase the risk of fibroids. So there is some evidence that stress hormones like cortisol, for example, have been associated with the chance of developing fibroids. So that's where that connection is, that discrimination may lead to stress and then provoke inflammation. It may also cause abnormal hormone balance, and that abnormal hormone balance leads to the formation of fibroids. So that's where race is an issue. Of course, the next is your age, and we know that as a woman grows older, she's more likely to develop fibroids. So women from their reproductive years, so after their teenage years going into early adulthood, that is when a woman is more likely to develop fibroids. However, we find that as a woman grows towards her pre-menopause age, those are especially the times when there's the highest concentration or the highest percentage of fibroids. So 60% of African American women aged between the age of 35 to 49 reported fibroids, vis-a-vis or against 80% of those aged 50 plus. Okay, so fibroids start to grow from in the reproductive age. As you go older, the risk of having fibroids is a lot higher. So that's something, and that cuts across most of the races. It's not something that's specific only to African women or African American women. White women, for example, 40% of those who are aged 35 have fibroids, against 70% aged 50 or more. So you can see that with increasing age, there's a greater risk of developing fibroids. And of course, this is related to menopause. It is more, of course, as a woman grows older, then she's approaching menopause. I think that's self-explanatory. The other risk factor that you can't do anything about is pregnancy. So for women who are not able to fall pregnant for whatever reason, a woman who has not been pregnant is more likely to have fibroids compared to a woman who has been pregnant before. And having more children actually reduces the risk of pregnancy. So being pregnant is protective. But of course, remember what we always say about risk factors. A risk factor is not a direct cause. It is just something that in studies, in research, you found that there is some association. It does not fully explain the development of fibroids. And don't forget that you can argue all this. Remember, there are many women who fall pregnant and they have fibroids. It is possible to have fibroids and be pregnant. So this is a risk factor that is of interest. And when you talk about it in terms of comparison, there's somebody who has never been pregnant is more likely to develop fibroids. That's true. However, it is possible for somebody who has been pregnant several times to have fibroids. Okay, so you take it as you will. I came across a tweet not too long ago, somebody blaming women not having sex or not having relationships for blaming them, or sort of trying to shame them into going ahead to have indiscriminate relationships because that will protect them from fibroids. Getting pregnant will protect them from fibroids. Well, the truth about that is sometimes a woman cannot help the fact that she's not pregnant. That is, if it's not from choice. She clearly cannot help the fact that she is not falling pregnant. So you can't say that it's because she's choosing not to have sex or have babies. That is why she's developing fibroids. So I don't want to sort of overflog this particular one, but clearly a woman who has never been pregnant does have a higher chance of getting fibroids. But remember that it is possible to have fibroids. They can coexist with pregnancy. Okay, so make of that what you will. Of course, things like family history of fibroids. So there's a genetic component which is quite strong. A lot of work has gone into different types of gene associations, the damage to DNA that happens while when a girl is still in the womb before she's born, during her youth, even before puberty. Different insults or different events that can affect the genes and lead to development of fibroids and the genetic risk. And then, of course, high blood pressure is something that has been known to be associated with fibroids. So again, this is something that you have to think about the way we think about the pregnancy one. So there is a link between high blood pressure and developing fibroids. And particularly the diastolic, that is the bottom level. When we say blood pressure 120/80, so it's the bottom number. The second number is the diastolic. So it's thought that that bottom number, that second number, is associated with a higher risk of fibroids if it is abnormally high. And this is whether or not you're using blood pressure medication. Just the fact that your body has that you've developed that condition. So it is good to control it, of course, but according to these studies, what has been found is whether or not you treat it, you still have that risk of developing fibroids because you've developed high blood pressure. And some statistics for you that women suffering from high blood pressure 5 times more likely to develop fibroids. And also, the earlier that the blood pressure happens or is diagnosed, the more likely a woman is to have fibroids. Okay, so that is looking at the non-modifiable risk factors. That is looking at those conditions where you can't do anything about them. Whether it's not in your control. If you're not able to get pregnant, that's something that you can't control outside of other outside of IVF, or outside of perhaps there's a particular reason. For example, if it's your partner, or if it's something to do with infections and so on. But women who are not able to, or who have not had children, you can't control that. You can't control your age, you can't control your race, you can't control your family history. Those are the non-modifiable ones. So now let's look at the modifiable risk factors. And so I've got a long list of them, and I want to say that many of these are controversial because we've done different studies which have found different results. That's why they're controversial. So yeah, I think that's the best way to just describe it. It's difficult to come down very hard or very much in favor of one particular position, as you will see as we talk about some of them. It's hard to do that, but I think it's good to have a discussion around them so that we are aware that these possible risk factors exist. So quickly going through the list, we have food additives, frequent consumption of soybean milk, obesity, vitamin D deficiency, excess vitamin E levels, endocrine disrupting chemicals, smoking, alcohol excess, and air pollution. Okay, so those are the modifiable risk factors. Let us start with being overweight. Let's start with obesity. We've said this is a risk factor, clearly something that we can do something about, because approaching weight loss with exercise and with portion control, different types of diet that you might feel suit you, will make a difference in terms of developing this. So a woman who is overweight or obese is more likely to develop fibroids. Now, this is related to the fat cells. Let me just quickly break it down. I don't want us to get too technical, but it is thought that the fat cells produce different chemicals and hormones that regulate different things, processes in the body, including inflammation. I'm going to give a few sentences to inflammation at the end of this class, but it's going to come up in different risk factors, but I'm going to dedicate just a few comments towards it at the end. So, being overweight, your fat cells are involved in chronic inflammation. Okay, so excess fat in your body allows chemicals and hormones or growth factors that allow the process of chronic inflammation to happen. And when chronic inflammation happens, it allows the disruption of your tissues and increases the chance for tissues to grow abnormally, which is what fibroids are basically. Because fibroids are tumors, that means tissues that are growing abnormally, just that they're not malignant, they're not cancer, okay? So let's get that straight. Being overweight is also more common amongst African Americans, according to some studies, compared to the other races in the United States. They've also noticed that fibroids happen more often in women overweight women, obese women after the menopause, and also a word for obese women with type 2 diabetes. They're more likely to develop fibroids. This is because of the insulin-like growth factor. That's a hormone that they produce. They produce excess amounts of it because they're overweight. Now, I think this was really interesting. Every extra kilo of body weight is associated with an increased risk of uterine fibroids, okay? And then increasing the body mass index, the BMI, by 1 unit, higher waist to hip ratios, and body fat percentage more than 30% increase the risk for womb fibroids. I'm going to place the link to these studies. I just thought it's interesting to see how specific this information is. And also visceral fat, which is associated with fibroids, which is associated with being overweight, of course, that also contributes to an increased risk. So this is what we need to know, that being overweight is associated with fibroids. That includes every extra kilogram that you are above your ideal weight. That includes every extra unit you are above your recommended BMI, excess waist to hip ratio, excess body fat more than 30% that's recommended for your body frame, and having excess visceral fat, belly fat, also increases the risk of fibroids. Okay, now next one we're going to look at is vitamin D. The vitamin D connection, let's break it down. So vitamin D, like I mentioned earlier, is made in the skin upon exposure to sunlight, and then the material, the chemical that's created from that exposure is transferred to the liver and the kidneys, and then spread to the rest of the body, where we use vitamin D for lots of different things. Vitamin D is affected by a number of factors like your age. We make less vitamin D as we grow older. And people with darker skin pigmentation like me need to be exposed to the sun much longer to get the vitamin D that we need. So I am more likely to be vitamin D deficient than a white woman. And that is across the board. So people with darker skin. So that is something to do with managing vitamin D. And of course, studies have shown that low vitamin D levels are associated with developing fibroids. We don't know whether we know that's one of the reasons, potential reasons, because I did mention it earlier, why women of African background may be at more risk of developing fibroids, but it's not the only factor. There have to be other things. Other things that can affect your ability to get vitamin D are your overall health. So if you're not very well, if you've got chronic illness or your immune system is not very well, then you can't process and create vitamin D properly, wearing clothes that cover your entire body, and preventing your skin access to sunlight, of course, will prevent you from producing vitamin D. Okay, so there are different recommendations. So it's good to talk to your doctor about vitamin D, particularly if you're a lady with fibroids or you're concerned about the possibility of fibroids. It's good to have your hormone levels checked. Sometimes your levels are just a little bit borderline and you can manage it with your diet. But if it's specifically low, and there are different levels for in different places. For example, in the UK where I practice, we say that you have vitamin D deficiency if your levels are less than 25 nanomoles per liter. In other countries, for example, the US is less than 20. So I would recommend that you're going to speak to your doctor so that we can look at your levels. And if you have deficient levels, you need vitamin D supplementation to replace it. And then after you've completed your supplementation, you maintain it with perhaps another course of lower dose supplements, or you're looking at your diet and looking at what you're eating, calcium-rich foods, for example, to help to keep your vitamin D levels on top. Keep on top of your vitamin D levels. So that's vitamin D. The next one I wanted us to talk about are called EDCs, or endocrine disruptor chemicals that disrupt the endocrine system. So the endocrine system is where your hormones are produced. Different glands and organs in the body will produce our hormones. Guys, if you're just joining this or watching the replay, please give this a like. I don't want this to be too technical, but I just wanted to make sure that we go through some of these points that I think are really useful. So the endocrine system is just simply where our hormones are produced, where they are stored, and so on. So for example, your thyroid gland, your adrenal glands that sit on your kidneys, these are examples of organs that produce hormones. So they are endocrine disrupting chemicals. These are substances that are found all around us and that are also manufactured, which can interfere with the way these hormones work. And I think they're so significant that we're living with them, and we just need to be conscious because they could affect the risk of fibroids in different ways. They could affect a baby while they're still in their mom's womb. They could affect a young child growing up. They could affect a young woman. So there's the early hit, where you have exposure to these EDCs in the womb or as a toddler or as a child who's growing up. And then there's the late hit, where as a young woman, you might be exposed to these EDCs through use of different, I'm going to talk through the different types of EDCs. Either you're using them or you're living in an environment where they are quite predominant. So what are they? What are some common ones? Industrial chemicals that can leach into soil and groundwater and then make their way into the food chain, so you can get them from the fish and animals that you eat. Products, and so this one is really important. Consumer products like plastics, household chemicals, fabrics treated with flame retardants, cosmetics, lotions, products with fragrance and antibacterial soap, and of course pesticides, fungicides, industrial chemicals. So the best way to avoid exposure is to check your labels and avoid products with known EDCs. So I will probably put this in the description box just in case you're somebody who's never ever heard about this. I'm going to put the entire list of the common EDCs that you might see in the label of your product. Things like DDT for pesticides, for example, things like phthalates or lead for children's products, particularly PCBs and dioxins. Then for plastics, things like BPA and phenol. So I'm going to make a list. There's lots of them. I'm going to just put it down in the description box so you can look through. So those are how EDCs are associated with an increased risk of developing fibroids, how they can affect you very early in life, even before birth, as a toddler, and as a young woman, as a growing woman. Exposure to these EDCs can be associated with increased fibroids risk. Okay. Right, so next, let's look at our diet next, which I know is another important area, not just because of, being overweight or obese, because we encourage you to eat healthy diet, make healthy diet choices, which includes lots of fruits and vegetables, which includes lean meat, which includes nuts, healthy oils, and so on in moderate proportions and with exercise. But then there's some certain foods which some studies suggest some produce some increased risk of fibroids, and these are fatty red meats, the soy nuts, soybean nuts that I've got at the very top of the page, processed sugary foods, candy, cakes, and all. Think of all these high sugar foods, and there is some thought about milk and other dairy products. Now, it is controversial. This is one of the ones I mentioned at the beginning, that some of them are controversial. So some studies suggest that drinking milk and other dairy products may influence the development of fibroids. And that association was with dairy milk, cow's milk, and soybeans. But other studies did not show the same result. So one study said there was no association at all. And in fact, another study actually said that yogurt and calcium reduces the risk of developing fibroids. So it's controversial. It doesn't really help. It's a difficult one. And particularly for ladies who are wanting to look at what choices can I make. There are clearly other milk substitutes or other milk types that you can go for. Because again, this guidance is not very straight, but we don't want you to miss out on your vitamin D and calcium, because that is an important aspect of your nutritional status. Remember, we've just finished talking about vitamin D. So to be able to balance that, you can look at alternative milk products that are not cow's milk, but also look at supplements of vitamin D so that you make sure that you're not deficient when it comes to vitamin D. Thank you so much for joining. I see a couple of people have joined the crew today, joined the class today, looking at healthy habits and lifestyle tips for fibroids. If you've got any comments, I'd love to hear from you what your experience with fibroids and some of these things we're talking about, these risk factors like diet, EDCs, the other things that we've mentioned earlier, they've just gone out of my head now. Weight, vitamin D. Let us know what your thoughts and your experience has been. Okay, so we've just finished looking at diet, and now we're going to move on to the next one, which I have here, which is air pollution. And this is one that we don't commonly think about, but it is important. Please don't forget to give this video a like. I don't say it as often as I should, but I would really appreciate your support by liking and sharing this video. That would really be great. So air pollution, we know it as something that, of course, is a leading cause of death, because particularly for people with respiratory problems like asthma or COPD, air pollution, we know, can trigger those conditions and even make them worse. And when we talk about air pollution, it's a mix of so many different things, but particulate matter, if you've not heard of that before, particulate matter, please look out for that in your reading. But this is a class of pollutants where you have small, tiny particles and gas. So things like organic chemicals, smoke, soot, people that cook indoors, soot, sulfates, nitrates. A lot of, in many countries, a lot of work has gone towards reducing the availability of home components or home kits or radiators or gas cookers or, things that household commodities or household items that can increase the risk of these gases or pollutants developing in the house. So a lot of work is done in a large scale national basis, but there's still some countries where it's a problem, or you have things like car smoke that can create a problem, dust particles, and so these are all environmental pollutants. These pollutants have been found to have some influence or some association with conditions like infertility, irregular periods, endometriosis, and fibroids. Now, this is something that we still need a lot of study on in. But remember, when we're asking ourselves what causes fibroids, first of all, you have to agree that it's not just one thing. We don't know everything that is responsible for a woman to develop fibroids, but we know enough to say that it is more than just hormones. It is more than just being overweight. It is more than just whether because she's not been pregnant before. It is certainly more than race. It is certainly more than age. So there's so many things involved, but here we have air pollution adding to the mix of things. So I would say that how this affects you is if you live or work in an area or an environment where particulate matter can be a big influence, and you suffer with fibroids and you're trying to look at how to control fibroid symptoms and so on, might be useful to look at that situation again. Moving home or moving house, changing jobs may be a choice to make in that regard. Okay, so we've talked about air pollution and particulate matter. Here's another one that is very controversial, and this is smoking. This is an interesting one. The effect of smoking or tobacco on fibroids. It is controversial because some studies found that smoking protects from fibroids or protects against fibroids, but other studies did not find this link. So whether you want to query the study, how the study was performed or not, the people who conducted the studies explained that the level of estrogen is lower in smokers compared to non-smokers. And they also felt that smoking affects the way that the liver can break down estrogen, so that in a person who smokes, there are lower levels of estrogen, which can support the hormone theory, because we say that fibroids are as a result of estrogen imbalance. On the other hand, other people that study, this sort of try to study this association say that, well, parts of cigarette smoke might make but might have some kind of estrogen effect on the womb and cause tissues, fibroid tissue, to develop. I know we don't know whether we're coming or going when it comes to smoking and fibroids, but we do know that smoking is associated with so many other medical conditions. So I think that if you're asking yourself, should I take up smoking because I'm trying to manage fibroids? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. In fact, I would, because we know that smoking and the harmful chemicals associated with smoking cause so many other medical conditions, it's a no-brainer. And of course, a lot of work is still being done in this area. And I just put it on the list because in the literature, you will read about smoking. I think the key thing is that smoking itself is not beneficial for overall health. So it is not, no matter what some studies suggest that it may protect against fibroids, I don't think that's a license to take on that habit because you're trying to protect from fibroids. So let's just bear that in mind. Smoking is not something to adopt because you want to protect yourself from fibroids. Okay, the next one, of course, is alcohol excess, and I've just added caffeine to that, so I don't forget the effect of caffeine. But alcohol, and this is heavy alcohol consumption, is a risk factor for developing fibroid. There's actually a positive link between current drinking and developing fibroids or fibroids growing. So perhaps if you're in that category and looking at what can I do, what are the things I need to give up, or what are the things I need to adapt or modify in my life or in my diet or in where I am, one of them is definitely alcohol. And we recommend that you're cutting it down or stopping it if you're struggling with fibroid symptoms. And there are a number of studies that show there is a clear link between current use of alcohol, whether in African American or Caucasian women. There is a link between those two conditions, between those two, that is excess alcohol and fibroid. There's also a link between caffeine and fibroid, so increased risk of fibroids from drinking caffeine. Okay, so I said I was going to make a little mention about inflammation as we round up this live stream, and it is that inflammation itself, excuse me, let me just leave the list of those risk factors for anybody who wasn't here at the beginning. So inflammation itself is a protective response that your immune system generates against foreign agents. The problem is when it's prolonged. That's the problem. It's when it's chronic. That's because it's supposed to protect us. But when it's a chronic response, and that inflammation that's chronic can happen from so many different things. We've talked about so many of them: being overweight, smoking, and endocrine disrupting chemicals, exposure, low vitamin D, and so on. All these things can contribute towards inflammation, chronic inflammation in the body. And so what happens is that state of chronic inflammation doesn't allow cells to be processed normally in the body. It also, so when cells reach a particular stage or they grow to a particular level, the body has a way of just taking care of them. They die off, and the body takes care of these things. But when chronic inflammation is happening in your body, the problem is that the body doesn't do what it's supposed to do. So cells just keep growing and growing and growing, which is how you might end up with fibroids, or the same thing also happens in different types of cancer. That is the damage that inflammation, chronic inflammation can have. And that is why it is one of the possible causes that we're looking at for, or associations we're looking at when it comes to fibroids. So anything that you can do to reduce chronic inflammation will help you to manage your fibroids and fibroid symptoms better. And that can be losing weight, that can be a healthy diet. So, we talked about this earlier, cutting down on sugar, processed foods, red fatty meats, soybeans, and instead adopting a sort of diet that is more towards plant-based, if you like. So plenty of fruits and vegetables, plenty of water, making sure you're taking a good, quantity of healthy nuts, low carbohydrates, or avoiding processed foods with high fat and starchy foods. Of course, exercise, avoiding stress and sleep. I don't think I go through any live stream without talking about the importance of sleep. Sleep is so important because poor sleep, sleep deprivation, chronic stress, all these things lead to chronic inflammation and then contribute towards the development of fibroids. Regular exercise, I think I've said that already. And then some of the other things that we talked about, like vitamin D deficiency, that you can actually check what your levels are. We looked at how it can arise, not having good access to sunlight, either because of your dark pigmented skin like mine, because of clothing, or even because of age. So we've talked through quite a few things that you need to be aware of if you're living with fibroids. And this is in addition to whatever treatment option that you've gone for, whether you're taking medication, whether you're looking at surgery, whether you're looking at natural methods. Adopting a lifestyle where you're conscious about some of these things that could potentially increase your risk of your fibroids getting worse or having difficulty managing your fibroid. Having these ideas or this mindset will be very, very useful. I haven't received any questions or comments, which is a bit of a shame, but I'm going to round up this live stream now. I know there are a few people that have popped in and then just stuck around. Thank you so much. Please give this video a like. And of course, subscribe to the channel as we leave. And I'm just going to quickly share with you the trackers and guides that we have throughout this month. I have put them on, they should be in the description box once I've finished setting up the description box for this video. But guys, throughout the month of July, Fibroids Awareness Month, we have discounts on these 3 items. You have the Fibroids Treatment Comparison Tool, which looks at 15 different treatment options for fibroids, analyzes them, helps you decide which might be better for you compared to the other. Then there's a treatment decision-making guide that just sort of tells you if this is your preference, if these are your symptoms, this is the direction to go. And of course, I have the symptom tracker, which I think would be very useful for women to keep track, make note of their symptoms. It really helps for you to be able to discuss it with your specialist so that we know the details of your symptoms. We know the experience that you're having. We can help you with that information to tailor the treatment that will suit you best. So guys, this is available on our shops on Seller and on Etsy. I'll put the links in the description box below. And please don't forget to come and join me every single day. There is a video on something to do with fibroids on this channel. Every single day there is something on our social media talking about fibroids, some education, some awareness. It's all going to be there, and of course on the website. And what else haven't I mentioned? The giveaway. So this is an opportunity for 4 lucky people this month to win digital concierge sessions with me or one of our clinicians. These are 2-hour-long sessions, 2 of them, that you would have video sessions where we're going to look at your symptoms, look at your issues, and to help you talk through them, help you, give you tips, give you pointers, guide you, this kind of a thing. Each one of them usually worth nearly £100. We're giving them away to 4 lucky people throughout this month. So guys, this and much, much more is what we have for Fibroids Awareness Month. I'm really happy. I'm really excited about this month and the opportunity to help, even if it's just one woman, along her fibroids journey. I'm really excited about the opportunity to do that. So please comment down below. Let me know what you think about these healthy habits and tips. Let me know what you think about these controversies. What kind of studies have you heard about? What's going on in your area around the world where it's with relates to fibroids? What are the issues? Is it slow diagnosis? Is it healthcare practitioners are not really taking your symptoms seriously? Is it problems with the medication? What is it? What's your experience? Let's talk. Let's talk. That's what this month dedicated to fibroids awareness is all about. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you haven't heard my stomach grumbling. It's been a busy morning and mid-morning. But yeah, I'm so glad that you joined us today. And hopefully I'll see you at the next live stream, if not the very next video tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.